Hello everyone, welcome to my channel, Estelle of Imladris. I am Kai, I use he, they, and she pronouns, and you're back for another episode of Seems Right, my show about costuming and storytelling. First of all, let's get all the way into it. I'm also looking around because my cat was just here. Hello Rigby. We live in a time filled with cruelty, genocide, and hate that is blasted at us in a non-stop torrent. And this can feel so overwhelming. I want you watching this show to know that it's okay and very normal to feel overwhelmed. The task before us is to not let that feeling become inaction and hopelessness. All it takes is doing one thing, whether it's protest, donate, do an act of care for your community, or other actions of resistance to create change. If we all do just one together. One person cannot change the world, but many individuals doing one thing can. Thank you for being here with me today. After this video, hell, during this video even, I hope that you can take one action. Don't forget that also care for yourself, your friends, your family, and your community are fundamentals to radical action and change. Be there for those in need in your community and ask for help if you are that person in need. But also take time for yourself, care for yourself, eat, sleep, take your meds, drink water, all of these important things, because they are also the way that you get up and do it again tomorrow. The only way through all of this is with each and every one of us together. In caring for those right beside us in our immediate communities, we must not forget the world that we live in. We should fight for the freedom of those oppressed around the world, especially those facing genocide and violent oppression. I stand with the people in Sudan, the DRC, Tigray, and all oppressed peoples of the world in their struggle for liberation. In this pivotal moment, as Israel has decided to take further action to occupy Gaza, I stand with Palestine. We cannot forget the Palestinians who are in an impossible situation without substantial support in this urgent time. Use !Gaza in chat to find some resources on where you can send aid and other actions you can take, including contacting your political leaders if you are able to tell them that this has to end now. This channel, for my various facets of community in tabletop, costuming, and fandom and more, is done out of love and a desire to teach, and I am grateful that you are all here live with me on Twitch or watching later in the VOD, either on Twitch or over on YouTube, telling stories and talking about meaningful storytelling and having fun playing games is what drives me every day, and sharing it with all of you is a joy. So thank you for being here with me in this community to talk, share, and both do something hopefully to make the world better, but also just to make your day better. If you're enjoying my streams, please consider following, and if you're able to, subscribing. I am an independent content creator, and all of your support helps me continue to tell stories and talk to you about what you can do to make your stories more rich and personal. I do post all of my videos, both for Seems Right and all of my other content over on YouTube about a week and a half after the episodes air live on Twitch. You can also watch the VOD until it falls off eventually on Twitch, but I do post it all over on YouTube, and I am trying to slowly go through and do channel chapter markings and things like that in the videos over there. So if you like Seems Right, go check out a huge catalog of me talking about everything from how to build a TTRPG character with a story-forward focus to why textiles are an interesting earmark of world building. You can check all of that out over on my YouTube channel. And if you're able to and you're over there, or maybe you're watching live on YouTube already, subscribe over there too. It's a huge help and it's completely free. All right. Well, other fun announcements before we get into Seems Right today. The Home We Remember, a game about exploring imperfect memory and reshaping ourselves, our memories, and our communities in the face of tragedy, is coming September 8th. From Tender Vicious Studios, the team behind my beloved Lori's House, and Frivolous Bear Studio, I had the great honor of being the very first architect for the game, and thus also one of the game designers, writing a lot about how to write a time loop in a TTRPG. So you can always use exclamation point THWR, the home we remember, in chat to learn more about the home we remember. And there's a link there to the Frivolous Bear Studios website, where on September 8th you can buy the 40-page PDF ashcan of the game, which uses tarot as its core mechanic and is a game entirely about investigating your memories and your history to make a choice and a change or not. Yeah. So that's all the fun announcements at the top. Yeah. So, some content warnings for today. You can always type in exclamation point CWSR in chat to get my additional content warnings for today's episode of Seems Right. And today, the subjects may include and will include a lot of these: Orientalism, racism, exoticism, systems of oppression, colonialism, war, weapons of mass destruction in the real world, incarceration, politics from the real world, death of loved ones, assimilation, and religion in the real world. Today is a very, very important and dear topic to me. It's very personal. I just hope that everyone is here to engage respectfully, but I am also open to questions in chat, and if a question is asked in good faith, I'm not going to judge you for not knowing a piece of information or the history. A lot of what I'm going to be talking about today is very, very, very poorly taught even in the United States, even though it is U.S. history. But please, I encourage you to ask questions, and I will do my best to answer them as we go through. Yeah. So, today, the subject. I'm so fucking tired. That's the subject. I'm so fucking tired. I am one Japanese American, and I am full and completely against the publication of Obojima, which is a Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition supplemental book published by 1985 Games. It is also available digitally on D&D Beyond, and it is a Ghibli-inspired supplement book that purports itself to be a pastoral fantasy of cozy anime. But I'm going to talk today about why there is no Japanese connection at all within the text of Obojima, and it is making money on the backs of my culture, my shared culture with people actually in Japan, and every Japanese American person that I know in the TTRPG space is very tired of this. So, a little bit of that. That's the subject for today. That's why we're going to be talking about a lot of real world stuff. We're going to start with kind of a framing in of the history and why this is so important, not just to me, but to the Japanese American community. I will caveat all of that by saying I am Japanese American. As you will learn through this story, I am very removed from contemporary modern Japanese culture. I don't speak fluent Japanese. I did not grow up in a home where Japanese was spoken. And through that also, you can extrapolate the culture of Japan is very different than the culture that I grew up in. And so my opinion and the reason why this episode is titled the way it is that I am a Japanese American, which is a very different perspective, but it is still, I've done work and research to be as inclusive of Japanese perspective on this as well as possible, especially focusing in on the creators of Studio Ghibli and focusing on specifically Hayao Miyazaki and his work and his ethos about why he does what he does. So let's get all the way into it. Hello everyone. I am Japanese American. That means that I am actually half Japanese by ancestry, and my other half is very, very, very white Europeans. And being mixed is a whole other subculture that I could talk about for another entire episode of Seems Right. But today I'm going to focus in specifically on my Japanese American ancestry and what that means and how it informs then what is going on with my active pursuit of educating around the now second Kickstarter for Obojima, the first Kickstarter having made $2 million. And again, as I said, is now platformed on D&D Beyond. And kind of talking about Orientalism and the TTRPG space's obsession with Japanese things, entirely devoid of Japanese culture. If you haven't noticed, I'm a little heated. I've been a little heated about this since last week. A way to read along on this and to do a little bit more research, even if you can't stay for the entire episode, I created a resource over the weekend called Kashi. And Kashi is an educational resource on the harms of Orientalism, focused specifically on the tabletop gaming hobby and industry's focus on Japanese culture. It's the idea that Ghibli-ness is not an excuse for Orientalist appropriation of my culture. So if you want to do more reading, there is both just like an explanation of Orientalism, some of the like idea behind why Studio Ghibli movies are the way they are and why they feel so unique and specific, the cultural resonance attached to that, and the history of some of the people who are being harmed outside of Japan by companies that operate and hire largely outside of Japan, not hiring people from that culture. So there's a whole resource there. And you can go do there's a bunch of reading. A lot of the stuff I'm talking about here, at least to some degree, is also covered on Kashi. So please read, share, and there's also further reading and also places and tools on taking action in the future, including doing things like not giving money to Obojima. But also resources for places if you wanted to send money in support of this. The Japanese American National Museum is at the forefront of pushing back against the U.S. federal government's desire to censor the history that I'm going to be talking about today. And they have fully told the U.S. federal government, if you want us to change and rewrite the history of Japanese Americans, we would rather close our doors than take money to lie. So if you want to put money towards this, if you appreciate my work and the work of the amazing other Japanese American and very well-informed and educated people that I've worked with to create Kashi, I ask that you think about donating money to JANM, which is the Japanese National American Museum here in Los Angeles. That was actually one of the founders on the founders wall are my grandparents. And it tells the story of Japanese American internment during World War II, which I'm going to talk about a little bit today. But also on there is Densho, which is an incredible collection of information and firsthand accounts of Japanese Americans who were affected by internment and affected by the events of World War II. There is the No More Museum, which it is, as of last week, the 80th anniversary of the dropping of the bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. A attempt from the West to completely destroy Japanese culture and completely, destroy the way we talk about war and country safety and things like that. The No More Museum is anti-nuclear proliferation organization and museum, hoping to educate people on the harms of what happened that day. And they're also seeking outside donations and things like that to expand their work in Japan. And there's also Sierra Forever, which is one of the custodial groups of the Manzanar National Park. I ask that you don't give money to the National Park Service in support of Manzanar right now, because they are actively trying to erase the history of what happened at the place that they're preserving, which is wild, which I'll get into a little today. So go check out Kashi, go do some great reading. There's also a further reading section that includes the entire text of Edward Said's seminal text, Orientalism. So if you are interested at all in media literacy around how the West takes things from the East and turns it into something else entirely manufactured by the West called Orientalism, you can go read the text about it. Every person I talk to is like, it's too bad you can't just put Orientalism in this. I'm like, yeah, I know. It's a like 100-something page book. But there is a full free PDF on there of it and some other really incredible books, websites, history, resources and stuff. So if you go check out Kashi, it's all on there. And if you learn anything, or if you're still trying to learn and find your way through understanding what all of this means, I encourage you to also talk about it with people. Share this information. I want this to be not so much a single person's very passionate crusade, but a conversation that we're having here in the TTRPG space, because some of the places to highlight outside of just Obojima being the inciting incident of all of this, but also Magic the Gathering has katanas in it. There's a samurai subclass in Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. There's whole sections of Japanese culture taken out of context and put into what is otherwise Western fantasy in the tabletop space, which in some places is done with care and proper respect of what the cultures that are being drawn from have asked. But most of the time, it's just someone going, man, I really want to be a samurai. That sounds super cool. What if ninjas are rad and everywhere? It's like, no, okay, well, let's talk about that, shall we? So that's the ground that we are standing on. Now, let's go all the way back and why this story, why I am so passionate, and the history of when American companies like Wizards of the Coast, like I believe 1985 Games is based in the United States. Most of these companies hire creatives from the West. A lot of them are hiring Americans to write American games. I can't say that it's entirely American creatives, because I know for a fact that a lot of these companies also hire people in Canada and the UK and other places. But Wizards of the Coast hires a lot of American creatives. What they don't hire is a lot of Japanese creatives. Japan has its own TTRPGs. Most of them are exclusively in Japanese. Some of them are translated. I just found out, I think yesterday, that Sword World, which is like the #1 TTRPG in Japan, is being translated and exported to English. But even that is not the full measure when there's an entire source book in Dungeons & Dragons from AD&D, Advanced Dungeons & Dragons, called literally Oriental Adventures, that features some of the most racist content I have seen in Dungeons & Dragons. And there are artifacts of Oriental Adventures even in modern 2024 rules. So yeah, there's a lot to talk about here. And this is not just about me, even though I'm talking about it from my perspective and my experience. This is also about how to talk about immigrant communities and diasporic communities being talked about in TTRPGs. It is also about colonialism. It is at its core about Orientalism. It is about U.S. civil rights and minority voices and who is allowed to tell and shepherd the stories authentically of their heritage. Which is so important. If you've watched other episodes of Seems Right, you know that I feel so completely that the details and the texture of things comes down to the things that are intimate, and people from those cultures are the only ones that really, truly, fully, intimately understand the stories that are being told. So, history. I'm talking about US history because of the companies. I am a 4th generation. I'm a Yonsei Japanese American. My great-grandfathers on my Japanese side of my family came to the US, one into Seattle and the other one into San Francisco. And at the time that they arrived, it was mostly men coming from Japan. And it was mostly to come to the US and earn a lot of money. And in theory, maybe go back to Japan. But at the time, it was Hawaii, California, and Washington were the only places the Japanese people were coming to the United States and immigrating to earn money and send it home, basically. And then in those places, over a very brief amount of time, laws were passed. Not only Japanese Americans were coming in as anti-Chinese legislation was being passed, but because they weren't Chinese, they could skirt some of that. And then people went, wait a minute, we also don't like you. And so there were also then anti-Japanese laws and acts that were created in Seattle, and just a long history of legislating against the presence of East Asian immigrants in these places before World War II. All of my ancestors ended up moving to Los Angeles, in the greater Los Angeles area. And so I am a fourth generation, not only Yonsei, but fourth generation Los Angelian. Very proud of being from here and made of LA dirt, basically. Not my ancestors being dirt. Me. I could put my hands in that dirt and go, this is me. This is where I go. And then there is a whole generation of Nisei, which is the second generation. So the way that these generations are named is because it's how they count generations in Japanese. So Issei is first generation. Ichi is 1. Nisei is 2. And then my father is a Sansei, and I am a Yonsei. And this is important because when you hear other Japanese American people talk, we're almost always going, oh yeah, I'm a Yonsei, or this person's a Gosei, or, because our culture is so much built around who we are now, because the almost entirety of our Nisei generation was either imprisoned by the US government for being born Japanese, or fought in a war for the country that was actively killing the home of their parents. So World War II happens, and after Pearl Harbor and the U.S. joins the war, a presidential decree is issued that all people of Japanese ancestry are going to be incarcerated by the U.S. military. It's called Order 9066, and it is a pivotal turning point in Japanese American history. My grandparents were both at least somewhat put through that process. My grandmother was in high school. And actually I have a picture because I love my grandma a lot. She is long gone, but the point being that, like, these are people. These are real people's stories. Thank you, Risky, for that hydrate. Where's my screen button? There we go. So this is my grandmother's high school, I think, senior class. And this photo was taken at an internment camp. The man in the middle, probably the principal of the school. And then all of these young Japanese faces are all people who are being held in prison by the U.S. government during their formative high school years. And this is a piece of education that is, I don't think, spoken loud enough. And right now the Japanese American community is trying to shout it very loudly because we're doing it again here in the US. And so it's the whole people who don't learn history are doomed to repeat it thing. So these are the people that are the foundation of Japanese American society now. These Nisei would go on to form social groups, all kinds of civil organizations. At the time, they were also connected to the ACLU, who was actually at these internment camps and demanding the U.S. government do better. And so there's also a long history of solidarity among the Japanese American community and other marginalized groups in the United States. And so that is all important, because when I say you are silencing marginalized voices by not including Japanese people in your storytelling, those are the kinds of people, my kin, my Japanese American community, have already been pushed aside and forgotten, because this piece of information I taught in my high school. The story of my grandmother and my great aunts, which is a footnote in many U.S. history books, is a huge part of my ancestry and a huge part of the culture that I belong to, including the Japanese American community here in Los Angeles, which is quite large. We have Little Tokyo, which is, again, the site of Janum. And we have a flourishing Japanese American community. Many of us don't speak Japanese. Many of us have never been to Japan. But it is not about the Japan that you see in anime. It is about the Japan that we have experienced, in which my grandparents, my relatives, and a lot of people that I know that have a similar story, when their great-grandparents came to the US, they didn't even speak the same kind of Japanese. But it is still Japanese. It is still Japanese culture. It is still Japanese history. And so that is my hyper condensed, like, Japanese internment happened and uprooted everything because all Japanese American people had to leave behind businesses, houses, communities, churches, to go to these camps and live there for years. Eventually, the U.S. government has paid reparations that were not big to the people who were incarcerated in this way. But even to this day, there is a huge movement towards education and making sure that people know, like, hey, we did this once. Maybe don't do it again. And it's a cornerstone for a lot of the Japanese American people in the TTRPG community. Most of the ones that I've gotten to know over the years told me, my grandparents were in this camp, or they served in the 442nd, which was a segregated all Japanese American army unit. And so there's a lot of knowledge communally about, like, who we were during World War II. And that is all so important because then when we come to tell our stories in tabletop, and one of the best things about tabletop is that people come to tell their own stories, right? No storyteller is telling their perspective in a void. It is not just a character plucked out of their own existence and they only speak for the fantasy of the Forgotten Realms or wherever they're from. The performer is the writer, and the artist then has history that gets put into this character. If you want to hear more about my thoughts on that, you can go watch practically every other episode of Seems Right. Yes. Thanks, ma'am. The reparation money did serve as the basis for the creation of JANM. And they just want to do good with the blood money that was, their life taken away from them for years. They put back into the community, and the Japanese American National Museum is a incredible place of community. Right now it is closed for renovations. But they're still out doing community events and things like that. They're doing a car exhibit right now. It's very fun. They do taiko lessons, they do origami classes, and they're not just open to people in the Japanese American community. They're open to Los Angeles. They're open to people who are here to learn, because that's the point of JANM, is to teach this history. And so now we go to the end of the war and people leaving where they have left behind their businesses, their houses, and all of these things. And they came home, and many of them never got those things back. You can't fix years of being gone. And so I think the most succinct way I've come to describe it is, as a Los Angelian, I think we have the greatest food on Earth. We have incredible food from all over the world. And one of the things every so often, especially in moments like this where I want to, give back to my community and spend money in my community and eat food from my community. There are no generational Japanese restaurants in Los Angeles that go any further back than Sansei, because all of the Nisei restaurants got given away and never reopened. Or they opened for a little while and closed. Or they went under other ownership and never went back to being Japanese restaurants. Because also at the time, yay Orientalism, there was a huge amount of Chinese restaurants in Los Angeles, but because it was seen as dirty, a lot of Chinese restaurants were learning to make Japanese meals already. And so a lot of the Japanese restaurants ended up becoming owned by Chinese owners. And a lot of them still own them today, which is great. And a lot of the people involved in that handoff, it was done in community and in good faith. And so a lot of the Japanese food in LA is generationally Chinese, because that is what the generational loss was there. There were farming communities that never went back to being Japanese, even though they were originally founded with a lot of Japanese people. And so that's what, like, that blood money was never going to fix that. And so instead it went to community. It went to building up each other and having a space of togetherness. And the Nisei also went on to create social clubs and activist organizations and a bunch of other incredible things that I grew up surrounded by, learning about the JACL, which is the Japanese American. I don't remember what the CL means. But there's a bunch of Japanese organizations that sprung out of this, of people trying to be together in community. And that's huge, but that loss is still there. And again, it goes back to when you talk about like systems of marginalization. That is a system of marginalization that lives rent free in my head when it comes to Japanese American communities. And so when things like anime, Citizen, thanks, man. The JACL is Japanese American Citizens League. That's what it is. The big picture of all of this being that now cut to the 90s and Pokemon and anime getting huge in the United States. And I'm a kid in Los Angeles. And suddenly it's cool to like Japanese stuff. And that was honestly exhilarating and really cool. I remember being really into Pokemon as a kid, like really, really into Pokemon. And there were anime conventions and things like that. And there was a love of Japanese culture that was springing up. But the thing that didn't go with it then was support and love for the Japanese community. And that was where my beef with anime began. I do like anime, and it's not a knock on people. My goal is not to say you can't love anime, because you should. It's a great medium. There's beautiful stories and fun stories to be had within the medium of anime. But when people venerate the media and they explore the culture, but they do not then participate in the culture, I get my hackles up very quickly, which is why Obojima really hit me in my angry place. And so this is when Studio Ghibli started to really take off. There were some movies in the 80s as well. You should definitely go check out the entire back catalog of Hayao Miyazaki and all of Studio Ghibli's work. There's some really incredible stuff. There's also some, like, I don't know, fine stuff, but that's a whole other thing. And people started to be aware of things like Princess Mononoke, and I think Howl's Moving Castle was early 2000s. I don't quite remember. Somewhere in there. And then Spirited Away was released in collaboration with Disney, which was the huge break into US audiences. But through all of that came people kind of understanding Japanese culture. And this is where the Orientalism really starts to come in. Because it's one thing for people to enjoy anime, to enjoy Japanese culture, and even learn Japanese history. All of that is above board and completely fine. It's great. Learn about other cultures. Learn about things that you're excited about and interested in. But Orientalism draws the line at when you take things because they are exotic. A word that I absolutely despise. If you watch a lot of shows that I am in for long periods of time, you will see that in our stuff we never use that word, because I ask people not to, because people consider Japanese culture exotic and it creeps me out. It just really creeps me out. And so the proliferation and love of Japanese culture was very exciting, but then didn't translate to people learning more about Japanese American culture. It didn't translate into people learning more about Hiroshima and Nagasaki and what happened during the end of World War II, and why there is whole anti-nuclear organizations in Japan, because whole families and generations of families were wiped out in a day. And I think the most clear and concise way that I can think about why it is so problematic for a project like Obojima that has no Japanese or Japanese American or Japanese diasporic creators, as far as I know, at all. They only have a cultural consultant, a singular cultural consultant. Is that every single person who is writing Obojima, which is supposed to be a love of Studio Ghibli, doesn't understand in an intrinsic way the culture that they are writing about. And every single piece of media from Studio Ghibli and Hayao Miyazaki is extremely founded in the fact that they all survived those bombs. For those of you who are unaware of the history of things like Godzilla, Godzilla was created as an embodiment of the deep and existential fear from Japanese people from the bombs. A lot of very fundamental cornerstones of Japanese media are either things to do with the war or things to do with the bombs, or echoes that came from that, including economic changes, political changes, and it is only until very recently that, you know, the more seminal works coming out of Japan aren't direct reflections of the fear, the terror, and the just destruction that Japan and the people of Japan faced during that war. Because yes, they were imperialist and colonizing other areas around Japan, but the people of Japan, many of them were not on board with that. And like Hayao Miyazaki in particular has been very public about how he thinks that the things that Japan did during the war were evil. They were very bad actions that were destructive in a way that is almost impossible to explain. So it isn't to absolve Japan of any wrongdoing. A lot of these stories are actually just about the absolute terror and sadness of the loss of innocence and cultural pride and families and humanity that came from that war. And then on top of it, Japan was occupied for many years as a result. There are still parts of Japan that are occupied by U.S. troops, Okinawa. There's just a long history of occupation and colonization of Japan as a result of World War II. And a deep part of all of the works of Studio Ghibli and Miyazaki in particular are all very, very, very pacifist. They are, bad things have happened, and here are the bad things sometimes even happening on the screen during the story, and they are bad. You shouldn't... I think of the scene in Howl's Moving Castle with all of the demons chasing him. Spoilers for Howl's Moving Castle, I guess. But when he becomes that raven form, that is like a World War II dogfight in a fantasy setting. And there are a lot of those throughout all of the works that are being referred to here in a book that's supposed to be a pastoral fantasy of Japan. Because yes, there are a lot of cozy things in Studio Ghibli movies, but put behind the backdrop of absolute destruction and cultural reckoning and rebuilding in the face of one of the most existential and terrifying events in U.S. world history, in world history, it makes those pastoral fantasies very different, because it isn't just about the beauty of living in the middle of nowhere in a small house made with paper and wood. It is also about escaping the violence of society and the world that has been lived in by these artists and by the characters if they are set in an Earth world in any way. And very often you'll see that in Studio Ghibli movies, there is an injection of some sort of older, terrifying force, whether that is a force of nature, a war. There's a lot of versions of them inserting into the story this great fear. And so these pastoral fantasies, these scenes of just beauty of rural Japan and things like that aren't about that. They're about wouldn't it be nice to live in a peaceful world? Wouldn't it be nice to live in a world where the environment is more important than war? That's what all of these stories kind of easily boil down to. I mean, I think the most literal one being like Princess Mononoke, where it's literally about nature taking back industrialization from the harms that have been committed to the nature. There's a bunch of other things. There's so many themes in these movies, but that is like a core one of the plot of the movie. And so I guess I'm kind of moving into talking about Studio Ghibli's works in general, but the works of Studio Ghibli, even the ones that are really aimed towards kids, like Kiki's Delivery Service and even My Neighbor Totoro, all of these movies still have this undercurrent of change brought on by the war, or brought on by a desire for peace, for a environmental reform to save the earth from, even before we understood how severe climate change was, Japan was reckoning with nuclear fallout in places where they still can't touch some of these things, and some of them are just gone forever. And so the naturalism, as much as it is a fundamental part of Japanese folkloric practice of Shinto, is also about it's just about in nature. And Hayao Miyazaki in particular has said so many times that he thinks that his works as a whole are angled towards, trying to help people understand that nature is in need of rebalancing, and humans have to play a huge part in that. Humans have to shepherd that future. Let's see here. Yes, if you haven't watched My Neighbor Totoro as an adult, I highly recommend it because it's actually a really depressing movie. There's a lot of really beautiful stuff in it. Blistar Bean asks, isn't there a famous anecdote about an American studio cutting parts out of a movie and Miyazaki being like, no, every part of the story is important. So when another studio tried it, he sent them a sword. That I believe that story. I don't know whether or not that one's actually true, but it sure does feel right, because he so staunchly believed that through art he could give emotional education and hope that we could bring the world back to more nature and naturalism. And there are deep currents of if you don't know much about like Buddhism and Shinto, they both have a huge impact on Japanese culture. Huge parts of Japanese municipal structure is actually based around shrines and things like that, whereas a lot of other countries that consider themselves non-secular, which Japan largely does, even though these are ancient folk beliefs, I can get into that another time, but Buddhism and Shinto, just the ideas within them, which kind of talking about Spirited Away is kind of a really good example of that. Spirited Away, there's a scene at the very beginning of the movie that, if you're paying attention, is like the entire movie summarized in literally one scene, which is our main hero Chihiro and her parents in a car driving past a bunch of small stone shrines that are being grown over with moss and grass that have been kind of dejected as they are moving to their new home. And Chihiro asks what those little stone houses are, and her parents say, oh, spirits supposedly live there, but is not given with like love and respect to the Shinto kami that supposedly live there. And then the entire plot is the fact that her parents don't respect the past. They don't really spend a lot of time to teach and nurture her into the culture that she belongs to, and is coming to get her, because that's like that's what the bathhouse is full of kami. And so there's a lot of like nuance built into Shinto and Buddhism in these stories. Buddhism believes that there isn't like a good versus evil, like a lot of Christian and Abrahamic folklore and myth kind of revolves around like Satan and God. Buddhism doesn't have that, and that's why there's so many places where the Studio Ghibli movies, even the villains, have complicated motives, complicated things about them. I was thinking about the lady that runs Irontown in Princess Mononoke, and how like they go out of their way to be like, she cares for these lepers, and then she gives them guns, and that is so emblematic to me of the complicated understanding that it isn't about good versus evil. It is about the hardships that we put on ourselves and how we care for the people around us. And in the end, her downfall isn't because she's evil. It's because she chooses industrialization over nature. And that she is resisting what are meant to be like invitations to fix the world by San, by Ashitaka. And she would rather have power. And they have that amazing scene of all the women talking about how cool she is, because she is cool, and hello. But it's that she makes these other choices that are against nature. And so taking all of those things into account, Lady Eboshi, thank you. She's so cool. I love her. And I think that very non-American perspective, because a lot of American stories do focus on the hero's journey, good versus evil. Listen, I love Star Wars. I love all of these stories that do prototype exactly the hero's journey, but so much of like East Asian folklore, and even like the greater Asian, like South Asian and things like that, are more complicated than just good versus evil. There are heroes that make really bad actions. There are villains that make really good actions. It isn't meant to be so linear. So I think often about the singular, the one, the only Connie Chong talking about why none of the villains in Transplanar are purely villains. They are antagonists. They have their own perspective. They have their own lives. Because to do otherwise is honestly an artifact of like Western colonizer media. We don't have a lot of spaces where complicated heroes and complicated villains are allowed to be bad or good. That they have to be one or the other, and otherwise audiences won't understand, is kind of the thought behind it. And so to remove that logic that most Western media doesn't really get, and say, well, you're in a kind of frictionless, smooth, happy fantasy of pastoral beauty and like standing at the bus stop with your big imaginary friend, is disingenuous to the culture that created these stories. So when it says like Ghibli inspired, you're literally just talking about then the aesthetics and not the culture and not the people and not the meaning behind these things. Because each and every one of the choices in all of these stories is rooted in Japanese culture, is rooted in a war that happened in the real world, is rooted in people's real lived experiences of loss, of grief, of just guilt and complicated feelings. Ghibli LaCroix, thank you, Blister, being that rocks. And so to tell stories, and this is true universally, not just Japanese media, but to tell stories without the people who understand those things and revere those things and care about them, even if they're not students of them. Like I always say, like I could never be a cultural consultant on Japan. I don't consider myself an authority to speak with, a person with authority to say, yes, if you put this in a book, people in Japan will be okay with it. I am not that person. I can only speak for my Japanese American experience, but I can speak for my Japanese American experience with quite a bit of authority because I've lived it my whole life. And I not just me, but my cousins. I have a lot of friends. There are other people in the TTRPG community that all have this shared lived experience of what it means to remember our Issei, our Nisei, and our Sansei, and even now there are Gosei. I related to some, which is a head trip for me. But the generations and the understanding, like I learned about Hiroshima and Nagasaki as a kid because one of the things in the Japanese community that even here in America, we talk about folding 1,000 cranes as a wish for hope. That story actually became famous because of Nagasaki. And so when I was a kid, when I turned 16, I think it was 16, my goal was to fold myself 1,000 cranes. And I actually did do it as a wish for a better world. And that is a cultural touchstone that even now, like if I went to Japan and said that I folded 1,000 cranes, people would know what I'm talking about. And yes, thank you, Blistar Bean. Yeah, they're permission givers when they're not. And it's also like they could say like what you're doing isn't offensive, which is not a bar worth clearing, in my opinion. It is in that you shouldn't be offensive. Like I'm gonna use Ace of Spades, that card game that came out of Europe. That is one of the most racist things I've ever seen in modern tabletop gaming. If you have the bandwidth to look it up, you can see what I mean when I say like it's deeply racist. It has blackface. It has all kinds of stuff about Native Americans. It's really bad. It's really racist. But there are extremes, right? Where that's not even, I don't think that would pass a smell test from a cultural consultant. It was so bad. Whereas Obojima, first of all, did pass the smell test with their cultural consultant. I don't know who they were. I don't know very much about them. I don't agree, but I also haven't done a lot of reading of Obojima because I refuse to. I've read enough. I've read enough to understand. I've done a pretty big overview, broad view of it, and I've looked at some of their like creature builds and subclasses and all that stuff, and I don't know. And the difference being that a cultural consultant doesn't create the art. They just say yes or no, or here's how you can make this less offensive. And it's up to the company and the publisher and the game designers whether or not they actually even listen. And the other option is hire people from that culture. Some of the best games that have cultural touchstones in it have people from those cultures. Hello, Sam. I love you. And the example that keeps coming up right now, because they're also doing a Kickstarter and they also are an East Asian based 5e supplement, is Nine Heavens Press. What is the name of their actual book? Hold, please. Nine Heavens Press is doing Black Market Guide to Immortality. And the thing about Nine Heavens Press is I know that they hire artists and creatives and writers and game designers from the cultures that they are referencing. I know those people. They are amazing writers and game designers. And on top of it, not only do they put it in the book, they then turn around and give to the community and invite creators from those cultures to participate in their own story. Whereas Obojima got booed out of Gen Con last year and then got platformed on D&D Beyond. So this is not just a takedown of Obojima, to be extremely clear. They are just the biggest example, and they are coming up with a new Kickstarter, and if they make $2 million and I don't say something again, I will be livid. And I just can't live that life. I cannot let them do another Kickstarter without me taking action. And thankfully, other JA people in the space, including Kappa and Jen and Kim, all came together and helped me. And we talked through a lot and like, it was very, very nice to go out and talk to other people that can speak with authority on how to even talk about this stuff and how to give good references and good information. So I had really good conversations over the weekend creating Kashi, because it's not just about Obojima. It is also about the samurai in the Dungeons and Dragons book. It is also about, every iteration of, there's so much in Vampire the Masquerade. There's so much in I remember that terrible actual play that was a bunch of white people playing a vampire game set in Japan, and everyone booed that then. Here is a resource now that we can all point to and say, this this is now a thing that we have, that this is why what you're doing isn't just hurting my feelings, but actually taking away people whose story has already been silenced many, many, many times. And you can hopefully learn by reading. I'm motioning on my screen Takashi, which is open on my desktop right now, but you can learn why and maybe do better in the future and invite people from that culture, not just to consult. And this is for any culture. This includes, like, say you were doing something set in the deep south and doing something that was like border communities in Texas. Invite someone from those border communities, more than one person, maybe even create a game around that, being a creative team from that region talking about border communities in Texas, because there are some amazing stories to come out of there that people wouldn't know unless they reached for and asked for people from those communities to come and tell their story. Thank you for the hydrate, Azura. And actually, it's been an hour, so it is going to be break time. I'm going to get up. I'm going to go put my face in my cat, get a snack, and refill my water since it's almost empty. And when I come back, I'm going to talk a little bit more about the ways that we can take action and ways to go forward outside of just my unending rage and frustration. And if you've got any questions, please drop them in chat, even if it's just kind of a like, how do I begin? Where do I go? Like, what are the ways to engage with this? And I'm also going to talk a lot about Japan's history with saying it's okay to use things from Japanese culture. Like, I've used some examples today that are actually, I don't love them, but all in all, according to like actual Japanese like cultural studies people, they're like, yeah, this is fine. So I'm going to talk about some of that stuff too, and why people going to Japan wearing kimono and things like that is completely fine. And when we come back, I'll do all of that. So thanks so much for hanging out, and I'll see you all in about 10 minutes. Hello, everybody. Welcome back from break. We're back for more seams, right? But before we get back into it, we got some fun channel point redeems over break. First of all, we have Show Us Your Dice. And I brought over some dice that I don't think I've shown you yet, which is very exciting. So, we're going to go to the down camera. We're going to go to this luxurious Dispel dice box. And I have, this is Siren's Tears. I love this set. So pretty. It has this iridescent glaze over it. And inside is just like beautiful swirly colors. Look at that. Ugh. I obviously use this set when I'm playing a Siren. I originally bought this because I was playing a Siren at the time. But I also just love this set. Yeah, I love Dispel. They're so pretty. Also, the finish on this is really cool. I don't know how well, like, the iridescence is not quite showing very well on that one, but, like, they're just really pretty. I don't know. I really like these. I did not put something away correctly. You saw nothing. There we go. Close. Thank you. Okay. And then I also have a picture. It's not just a picture. It's a video of Rigby. So this is actually a video of Rigby from before he was my cat. This is a video from his previous owner showing Rigby outside staring at a lizard. But he loves to hunt. He thinks he's a hunter. Yep, that's the little man from what is now 1,000 years ago. And now he thinks that he can hunt. He cannot. In fact, when he goes outside, he wants to chase Leaf and eat Leaf. But I think about that video every so often, and I had it open on my computer because it was in a folder I was looking at, and I was like, aw, little baby Rigby. He's like maybe 2 in that video. He's 10 now. Yeah. Well, thank you for that. A reminder, anytime you want to redeem those Corvid points, They're available for you. There's a bunch of fun stuff in there. I have been leaving my fun accent workout deactivated, but sometimes when I'm playing video games, I'll do a fun accent while I'm playing. There's also, you can look at the dice that I keep around my desk. Sometimes I actually have a real cat when someone does show us your cat. I went and asked them and they both said no, they want to stay where they're cozy and settled right now. But sometimes we come back from break and there's a cat in my lap. So yeah, please, by all means, watch, enjoy. There's also twice per stream, you can redeem a tarot card pull. I do keep tarot cards right here on my side table from this amazing this amazing camera that was actually funded by you, my wonderful community, so that I can show you things like beautiful dice, and books and things like that over on my lovely side table. So please, it's a good time to. It's always a good time, actually, for me to show you pictures of my cats. Or the dice that I always have around my desk because I'm a professional TTRPG performer and it's part of my job, right? Having lots and lots of dice is a part of my job. That's how that works, right? Anyways, well, thank you for that. We're gonna get back into Seems Right. We're gonna do a little refresher on wow, I can't type. Nope. There we go. Exclamation point CWSR should give you the content warnings for Seems Right. They're not loading though. There we go. Additional content warnings for this episode of Seems Right include Orientalism, racism, exoticism, systems of oppression, colonialism, war, weapons of mass destruction in the real world, incarceration, politics in the real world, death of loved ones, assimilation, and real world religion. Because we're getting into it. For those of you who are just joining us, I'm talking today about why you should include Japanese voices in things that are inspired by Japanese media that are being professionally published, and things like that. Now, the second half, the first thing I want to talk about is Japan is in a unique situation with the way that it overall has decided that Japanese culture can be shared. And this has been true for a very, very long time. So Japan as a country has fluctuated in and out of being a very isolationist country and being a very open country. And right now I would say it's somewhere in the middle, leaning a little bit more towards being isolationist. There is a far-right movement in Japan that really, really wants to close down the country and make things pretty much exclusively for people of Japanese descent. But there's pushback on that, thankfully. But with that ebb and flow, Japan has had a lot of time to both in action and in writing and words say how they feel about people borrowing pieces of their culture, because Japan has a lot of culturally specific things and practices that have been dispersed throughout the world. I'd say most famously are the kimono, the katana, and the Japanese tea ceremony, but there are a wide plethora of other things. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about those things and why even things that have permission to be used and shared and adapted by other cultures are better served by being at least somewhat made in concert with people from those cultures or people who understand those cultures, etc. So the first one I want to talk about is the kimono. So kimono is a pretty wide category of garments in reality. It is a Japanese style, what we would call like a wrap tunic style garment from like a Western clothing construction perspective. And kimono can be everything from something made of like rough cotton all the way up to like beautiful silk. And they serve a lot of purposes. There's everything from like casual working in the fields kimono all the way up to multi-layer formal like wedding, funeral, moments of state and things like that kimono and formal dress that way. Japan loves when other people love kimonos. They've always loved it. Some of the biggest early conversation with Japan from especially Europe involved Japan giving elaborate and beautiful kimonos as gifts to European leaders. There are kimonos that have been gifted around the world by everything from military leaders down to, family and business operations. So the kimono itself has been gifted as kind of a global object of awe. And to that end, Japan historically has had not a lot of issue with people making kimono outside of Japan, and engaging in wearing kimonos in a way outside of going and formally putting one on in Japan or on a Japanese person in a formal way. That Japan has a very formal way of putting on kimonos, extremely formal. Like, the idea of me putting on a kimono stresses me out because it's so specific. And like, you can go to Japan as a tourist and actually rent and be dressed in a kimono. That is a very normal thing that Japan is very open to. So kimonos are not something that you should say people are definitely allowed to wear kimonos. They are. People are allowed to wear them of any background in any place. And so if you see someone at an anime con wearing a kimono, that's fine. And the hair split on that I just want to point out is that the history of the kimono and the history of the gifting and very liberal sharing of the kimono garment is cultural. And to wear a kimono correctly involves at least understanding, if not training with or being dressed by a Japanese person. There's a bunch of really fun videos of influencers and content creators that live in Japan that are Canadian, American, European, and a lot of them talk about people who are in Japan who want to wear kimono. One of the number one things they all say, because they hear what people say when people don't wear them correctly, is if you're gonna come to Japan and wear a kimono, rent one, have it put on you, wear it the way it's put on you, and do not adjust it, because people will judge you if you are wearing it wrong. And that's one of those things that you have to understand, that if you're wearing a kimono and you don't have that cultural understanding and the specificity and the knowledge of exactly how to dress a kimono, the people who actually own the idea and the origin of the kimono are going to be wow, it's a shame you're not wearing that right. And no one wants that. No one wants to feel that way. And to me, that's an excellent summary of a lot of this stuff. It isn't even always that it's done with malicious intent or done by saying this is mine. Sometimes it's done with the knowledge that you're borrowing something from another culture and just done poorly. And that's also you could fix that again by being in conversation with someone who is Japanese. Yes, my mother says that people wear kimonos to Dodgers games. That does not surprise me at all. If those of you who don't know, the Dodgers are having a Japan renaissance because we have Shohei Ohtani, who is the baseball superstar, maybe one of the best athletes alive right now, and that is not hyperbole. And so we actually have Japanese tourist groups and things like that because he's Japanese from Japan. And there are Japanese tourist groups that literally come to just go see a Dodgers game with him playing. There are Dodgers stores, franchise stores in Japan, because Japan is absolutely obsessed with Shohei Ohtani and thus now the Dodgers. Northern Gale says, we had an exchange student who gave me a wonderful kimono. I love it dearly. She did teach me how to wear them a bit. I'm just never sure when to wear it or or that I'm going to do it right. So it's nice. And it's so nice I don't want to wreck it. Yeah, I heard. Kimonos are so beautiful. And when you see them nicely folded and things like that, there is a kind of level of awe, not just because of the cultural significance, but they're just beautiful. Kimono are works of art. They are textile art at their finest, and every shade of them. If you've ever watched Chaos Protocol, I had a little love letter to the Japanese indigo kimono, which is seen as more of a like peasant's kimono that was repaired and repaired and repaired in Arc 2 of the Chaos Protocol, because I love kimonos. I think they're so cool, and indigo kimonos in particular are just this practice of like love and dye and textile art that is so cool. And the all of that is to say that like it is a statement of Japanese culture, and when you wear a kimono, people are going like Japanese. It's very rare that I see people, even in this day and age where people can't tell the difference of like different cultural dress, that I see people misunderstand a kimono, which is honestly new and cool. And it is thanks to things like anime and the proliferation of the popularity of Japanese media. And there are also cool adaptations of kimono. I'm looking up. There is an artist. And I'm trying to remember her name. That and there's a whole history of this too, of specifically traditionally styled Japanese kimono that are made entirely using West African textile art, and they're so cool that it like almost upsets me. And not because I'm like mad, but because I'm like, this is so cool. My mind is blown, and I feel like I have been expanded as a person. Because this is a like beautiful marriage of two cultures that fit together perfectly, because the kimono is about the textile. It is about the art. And so when people understand that, what can happen is beautiful. And this is all done with respect, and with, you know, so much love and care. So Sergei Montague is a Cameroon, West African artist who specializes in making West African textiles, Japanese kimonos. Sorry, I'm also reading at the same time. And so this is just an example of two of them, and they're so cool. Because also West African textile art has this beautiful, rich history of sourcing dyes and prints and block printing and stuff like that, which is so elaborate and beautiful. And the Erica's also talking about Japanese culture and like the politeness culture there, which is extreme. And I don't mean that in a bad way. It's just like, even down to the language and the nuance, Japanese culture has like levels and tiers of politeness and address and things like that that we don't experience in English-speaking Western countries. Even if you have been taught like etiquette and things like that, Japan makes that look like child's play. But yeah, these and these are accepted and beloved by Japanese artists. So like when I say like the kimono is for everybody, I mean it. And now the other side of that, and something that always really has ruffled my feathers, the katana and the samurai. So people love samurai movies. I love samurai movies. Who doesn't love a samurai movie? They're violent, they're terrifying, and they're usually about something very biting and cultural from Japan. I love samurai movies. And with the love and celebration of samurai movies and storytelling around samurai that came out of the 70s, there is this very strange and specific belief about samurai, and I don't know how much you know this, but if you go down the deep dark rabbit hole of the scary parts of the internet, there's a lot of people who venerate Bushido and samurai culture, and I just wish those people would think just a little bit more about it, because samurai were warlords, they were tyrants, and very often they were vicious killers, and not in a like knights doing a good thing way. I highly recommend, if you ever want to get just like a crash course in the real history of samurai, even though it's historical fantasy and it's definitely got some places of like very specific inaccuracy, the new Shogun series really gives you a more complete picture of like, nah, the samurai, they weren't fucking around. They will just kill a dude in the worst way possible. And I bring that up because the katana has proliferated pop culture. There are lots of examples of katana showing up in all kinds of strange places where I'm like, why is it a katana? I was just ranting yesterday about how katana just means sword, right? It's not there are actually like a bajillion different kinds of katana. And they're named by their size, their style of blade, the way that they cut, if it's a straight blade, if it's a curved blade. There's a huge list of kinds of katana. And within that, though, I always ask the question of like, why the katana? When if we borrow swords from other cultures, very often we don't bring with them the name in the West. One of my favorite kinds of swords, because they're very cool and they have a lot of interesting culture around not only the use of them as a weapon, but also as a use of kind of like a sign of nobility, of masculinity, of dancing, of a bunch of other things, is the talwar from South Asia. And we don't call them that, though. We call them scimitars, but a talwar is a very specific weapon. And so to kind of specifically keep the katana, and you can kind of trace it back to samurai movies as to why people are so obsessed with them, that you always have to go like, but why? And why do so many people have bokken and things like that hanging above their desks? And it is a sign of a non-cultural based understanding of that weapon, including that Japan is very like anti-violence in a lot of ways. The katana lives in this strange place of like, you can wield a katana in Dungeons and Dragons that is called out as a sword, but there's also, I believe, official mechanics for a katana. And it is a very nice sword. Don't get me wrong. I think they're very cool. I love katana. But it's a head scratcher as to why that and not the many other kinds of culturally specific weapons that exist in this world. And like from cultures that, yes, like Japan does have its own martial art. Karate is very cool. And like Aikido and all of the other martial forms that come out of Japan are very cool. But the most famous ones, especially in the West, tend to be from China. Like we love Chinese martial arts and like all the practices and things that go into that in the West. But culturally, we don't talk about Chinese swords, even though they are specific and beautiful. So unless you are consuming media made by Chinese people, very often you're not going to hear a Dao show. You're not going to hear about these things because they're very, Dao blades are very culturally specific. So yeah, it's the question of why. And it is that there is acceptable Orientalist exoticism, and then there's like gross and dirty Orientalist exoticism. And it really, it isn't about an individual person. Like if you like katanas, Godspeed to you. I'm not trying to pick on you. I'm saying if you look at the whole vision of which things stick out more, it's always the ones that are seen as more acceptable. And very often the ones that are more acceptable are also exoticized and fetishized. Because there's a lot of, if you just go on to like stock images on the internet, there's a lot of scantily dressed women holding katanas specifically. So the association there is very odd, and I don't care for it. It kind of brings me over to the like exotification in general that is attached to a lot of this that I find upsetting. And there are signs of it being attached to projects like Obojima. And maybe not from the creative side, but from the consumer side, which is that there is a story floating around with all of my stuff about Kashi, that when the first Kickstarter for Obojima was still running their Kickstarter, they announced that they had hired a cultural consultant, which is great, and people should celebrate that. And a bunch of people canceled their Kickstarter backing because they had hired a cultural consultant. And if you ever see a project that there's a majority voice in any way, even if it's not the entire majority, but there's a loud enough minority voice that was excited about something and then backs out because they're offering more cultural resonance, you should be wondering why and wondering about that piece of media. Yeah, it's bad. That's bad. And there's a lot of people still, and I've encountered some of them because of Kashi. There's a huge population of people out there that think that they own the ability to use Japanese culture as they see fit. And when I talk about my desire for this particular movement towards education, I talk not only about the tabletop industry, but also that us as a community, tabletop as a hobby, that we should be cultivating a community of cultural understanding and exchange, not fetishizing, which is what that was. It was a whole group of people saying, but I want to play with my Japanese dolls the way I want to, which is gross. And I hope in listening to all of this, you don't hear me ever say in the words that I am using, and I will say it very clearly, I don't want you to stop loving anime. I don't want you to stop learning Japanese or loving Japanese history. In fact, when I was working on Kashi, I reached out to someone who is not Japanese, who I trust as an authority on things about Japan that I don't know as much about. Because that cultural knowledge is important. And I love that people love Japanese culture. I just also wish that people would love Japanese people when they love Japanese culture. And with that, I also wish that people would hire Japanese people if they love Japanese culture so much to write a book about it or to do an actual play about it. Let's see. Yeah. Thank you, Jason. I don't see color feels a lot like I don't see culture. Correct. Yeah. Talking about the Twi'lek. Oh, Erica. Yes, for those of you who don't know, the Twi'lek, the Star Wars alien species that has the like really long tendrils, they're called leku, that hang instead of hair, all had French accents and were extremely exoticized, and they were like largely, sex workers in early Star Wars, and they've moved away from that, thankfully. But like it's one of those things where Star Wars created an entire species to exotify and fetishize, and there's a lot of that in the real world as well, like the geisha of it all, the tea ceremony of it all, even the like love hotels and all that stuff that people are so fascinated by about Japan. There are people attached to those stories, and like I could go on for days about the dark side and the like kind of interesting cultural nuance of those things. Some of them are good, some of them are dark and terrifying, but there is nuance to it. It isn't just, oh, haha, Tokyo is full of places that have host bars and things like that. It is so much also about like the culture as to why they got there, and like how Japanese culture operates, and the permission structure for people to be themselves and how they socialize. And so the more you can even just have people who have a similar perspective involved in the process of the creation of the thing. So going back to that Vampire the Masquerade game that was set in Japan, they got very defensive. They did not take it well, and they were very rude. But the answer would be, if you wanted to do a Vampire the Masquerade show set in Japan, ask Japanese people to be on it. Hire a cultural consultant. Do those things. Like that's... It's not a perfect world where every show is gonna always find that, because there is, like in the US, somewhere I read the math that like it's like less than 0.5% of the US population is Japanese. And listen, we're great. We can't be everywhere at once, but if you wanted to hire me because I'm Japanese, you know where to find me on the internet. But there's a lot of people, especially a lot of situations where I would say no, because like I was thinking about like, some of these projects are just doing it because they fetishize Japanese culture. The bigger picture of, if you want to do something about a specific culture, should always be framed around, why am I a person that can do that with authority, and can I involve creatives and support creatives who would be more authentic in telling that story. And it's the best way to move forward in general with, especially in tabletop, where you're not only telling a story, but you are also compiling a way for other people to tell stories and engage with the culture. And the best way to do that is with authority from people from that culture. And to kind of like frame in the last of this about TTRPGs, there is not a single TTRPG on the major market written by Japanese Americans. Not a one. And there's also not one in English written by Japanese people that has any major cultural prevalence. Now weigh that against how many times you have seen anime-inspired or actual Japanese cultural things in your TTRPG media. It's just that 0.5%, not reflexive of the presence of Japanese culture in media. And so the best solutions, the ways forward from this, are to support people from those cultures. And it's not just about Japanese culture. Definitely. It is also about, like, if you were going to do something about South Asia, I would be upset if no one reached out to my beloved Valiant Dorian, who is a very wonderful South Asian person. Or Humna. Or a bunch of other amazing people from those cultures. There is an outsized presence of the thing that we always talk about in the TTRPG space, I feel like, which is tables entirely made out of people of the same ethnic group being white people. And how we're done with that homogeny. And we would like to see more interesting groups of people at a table. And one of the ways to do that is to facilitate creators from other cultures. And even if they're still American or Americanized, or they're from Canada or Europe and they are ethnic minorities in those places, like, we should be reaching out and trying to find spaces for those people to tell stories, so that there isn't just 3 South Asians that get all of the South Asian TTRPG seats in major media. And the same is true of book publishing, game design, art. All of these places are places where you could involve people from other cultures and they can speak with authority on their experience. And it not only is something that you should do because it's right, but also it'll make your stuff better. It just will. Like, some of my favorite Dungeons and Dragons writing that I've seen was done with diverse people attached to it and bringing diverse and interesting perspectives from their backgrounds and offering culturally resonant and specific things within the context of a TTRPG book. If you ever want to see some of that done really well, go check out Pathfinder. Paizo does a really good job bringing in a lot of artists from various backgrounds to speak with authority and write creatively about their lived or cultural experience. There are really cool books out there. We don't have to keep giving money to the same 10 white dudes. And if you are in a place of privilege and power in the TTRPG space, I'm not saying you have to go away. I'm saying support people who can tell interesting and unique stories, especially ones that you're excited about. A solution that I would be very happy with is if 1985 Games wanted to hire a bunch of Japanese writers, wanted to bring in people who could speak with authority on the culture, and in the next version of Obojima, infused it with real cultural resonance. That would be awesome. There are so many ways forward that aren't just no. There are so many ways forward that are inclusive and rich and better in not only just in a like moral way where you should let people tell their own stories, but also the end result will be more rich, more beautiful, more informative. I always say, like, TTRPGs are an exercise in emotional education because you're experiencing things from other perspectives. And if you can infuse a game with those other perspectives, it's huge. So if you've ever played a game written from another cultural perspective, like, you learn something new about that culture, even if you're not sure. And so I always encourage you, and this is true across marginalizations as well. Like, if you are interested in telling more interesting stories, reach out to people from other groups and ask them to join your story. Or ask how can I support your story? Some of my favorite people in the TTRPG space know that they come from a place of privilege and instead offer support, money, logistics, advertising when they can to uplift marginalized voices. And that is, at the end of the day, the thing I want the most out of all of this is for people to, if they want to do anime stuff, reach out to the people, the marginalized voice that is authority on those kinds of things, and let them tell some of it. They don't even have to tell all of it, but let them tell some of it, or support them in telling that story. If you want to go see someone do some cool Japanese stuff, hello, hi, I'm Kai. I use he, they, and she pronouns, and you can find me everywhere as Estella Vimladris. I use Japanese shit in all of my TTRPGs. And it's not just me. If you go to Kashi, I worked with Kappa, who's an incredible storyteller who is mixed and Japanese. I worked with Kim from 5GMs in a Trench Coat. GM Burb, who also is, all these people are of Japanese ancestry. They all tell really good stories. And we're not the only ones. You can go to Sachi, you can go to Erika Ishii. Like, there's a bunch of really cool voices that could be uplifted in this space if you wanted to tell those kinds of stories with actual cultural resonance. And like a banner moment for me. And if you go back and watch it again, and I highly recommend you do, knowing all of the stuff that you know about me and my big feelings about this now, is the Arc 2 of the Chaos Protocol. We had Erika Ishii on as a guest, and it was the very first time I had ever played at a table with another Japanese American, ever. And I was bowled over by how much I felt the cultural resonance in a scene where we were talking about mochi. We were literally talking about like handmade mochi, which is another like cultural touchstone. And that scene was not only important for Zeinen, but it was so important for me because suddenly I was like, this is that storytelling with people that understand that shared cultural experience. I felt it as a, trans non-binary person with transplanar, and then I felt it again in a new and different way, telling that story in Arc 2 of the Chaos Protocol. So I know from my lived experience that bringing other creatives together who have that shared experience, you will make something more beautiful. It is one of my best scenes ever as a TTRPG performer. I'm gonna cry just thinking about it. And it wasn't just because like I'm proud of the scene and I really admire Erika's work, but also that they brought their Japanese American experience. And we've talked a little bit about that just online and things like that too, that they also had family that were impacted by internment. And so when people remove the culture from a story that is about a culture, and Studio Ghibli, don't let anyone tell you otherwise. Every single one of those movies is about Japanese culture, is about Japanese history, is about Buddhism and Shinto. It is about environmentalism from a Japanese perspective. It is so important that the culture is not erased from those. You cannot do Studio Ghibli without Japanese people. You just can't. It doesn't work. And thank you so much, all of you, for sitting and listening to all of this, because it is something that actually drives me to be a TTRPG performer and to do things like Seems Right, because I believe that cultural exchange is so important, and to do it ethically, to do it collaboratively, makes stories rich and beautiful, and doing it everywhere all the time as a TTRPG performer has made it so that I'm like, oh, we should all be doing this forever, because some of my favorite work is with people from very specific cultures, bringing their cultural resonance. I could talk forever about the Chaos Protocol and all of the amazing, beautiful cultural resonance that is in it, but also it is in other projects that I've worked on, like across the board. I love when people bring their cultural specificity to all of that. Oh, goodness. So, wow, that was a lot. I have a few minutes for questions. And Lena writing something beautiful. Thank you for the hydrate, Risky. I guess the parting thought that I have is, if you love Studio Ghibli, and I certainly do, I know a lot of you do, and this is all media, but especially Studio Ghibli, if you love Studio Ghibli, go figure out what about Studio Ghibli movies in particular you like. And replicate it, echo it. Don't make it Japanese. Howl's Moving Castle is a very multicultural story. It is, as a movie, infused with Japanese perspective, but there's a book, there's a bunch of other stuff too, that you can also take a new spin on and enjoy your perspective on. But don't call it Ghibli inspired. That's it. And the potential within that inspiration is incredible. And I never want you to feel like you shouldn't do it. I just want there to be more space for the storytellers to speak with authority on their own lives. So yeah, if you could do 2 things for me. 1, read Kashi. Even if you just read a few of the articles, there's stuff on there that I think is very helpful, just thinking about Orientalism. Go read 1 article, 2 articles, more. There's some really cool stuff in there. There's this amazing breakdown that this film naturalizer and film student did about, or film theorist did about, like, all of the works of Studio Ghibli that are so good. That's on there. It's the one that just says Miyazaki's themes. So good. All of these articles are so good. But go read that and then do 1 thing, whether that is sharing Kashi, talking to somebody. Go do 1 thing to change that our TTRPG ecosystem needs to let people tell stories from their own cultures. Needs to. It is the only way forward for the TTRPG space to ethically continue to be a multicultural space. Yeah. Well, that was a lot. So thank you. It means a lot that you watch this, and that people have been so supportive of Kashi. And know that if you see anyone being a troll in the comments, I'm just gonna delete it. Do not engage with them. Don't feed them. They are getting the boot. And if you are a Japanese or Japanese diasporic creator, and you have any thoughts or articles that you would like to add to Kashi, please reach out to me. There is an email at the bottom of the page link that you are more than welcome to reach out to, because I don't want this to just be my resource. I was joking with Kim that, the joke is always going to tap the sign, because this conversation, Obojima is not the first time we've had this conversation. It will not be the last one. But I'm hoping that the next time when someone does something like Obojima, a Japanese setting, we can just tap the sign and a pamphlet will fall out named Kashi. And I want this to be a communal resource. So if you have any thoughts, opinions, supplements to add, this is an ongoing conversation and a living resource and document. And if you've people who you think would be benefited by learning about this that aren't learning about Studio Ghibli, Orientalism is a problem for everybody in practically everything. Lena, you want to see a cat? Aren't you tired of seeing cats? No, impossible. Okie doke. Where are the cats? And yes, I've been very fired up about this for days. And so thank you for letting me give it to you all in person. Here he is. Him. Look at Rigby. This is him helping me actually wrap up from stream on, I think that was Thursday. he has been so cuddly, and he's decided my wrist rest is an excellent cat pillow. Thank you. Thank you, Indie Wanderer, for looking out for Risky as well. Thank you for the hydrate, Risky. Oh, well, I'm going to leave Rigby up for a second while I talk about what's going on for the rest of the week. Very excited. Tomorrow, we're going to be back over on Happy Jack's RPG with more Road to Nowhere. I was going to say Electric State, which is also true. Road to Nowhere is an Electric State actual play in which I play a drone pilot named Kilo as we make our way through the mid-apocalypse world that is an alternate Earth set in the 1990s. And we're on a long road trip going up to Oregon. So you can check out that at Happy Jack's tomorrow at... Nope, that's Happy Jack. Wow, I cannot type today. There we go. So that's tomorrow at 7 p.m. Pacific, 10 p.m. Eastern. We'll be live doing that. And then on Wednesday, I'll be back with more 1,000-Year-Old Vampire as we're getting to some perilous times. I'd be very curious to see how much longer this 1,000-Year-Old Vampire game goes. It's not me wanting it to end. It's just that that's how 1,000-Year-Old Vampire goes. So we'll be back with more 1,000-Year-Old Vampire on Wednesday. And then the last thing I'm doing this week that you'll see me on the internet for is on Thursday. We're going to have a new episode of Lori's House. We're going to have episode 7 drop. So you can always catch up. It is a podcast which you can find on any place you get your podcasts. It is a all new game that we are playing called The Home We Remember, which is a forthcoming game from Frivolous Bear Studios about memory and community and the selfless act of self-exploration, in which I play the architect, which is the GM for that game, guiding 3 people through a great tragedy and exploring their memories and their community and themselves. So yeah, you can check that out, and episode 7 drops on Thursday. And then, as I said at the top of stream, also the game that we wrote called The Home We Remember for Lori's House has been announced for coming out on September 8th from Frivolous Bear Studios. I'm very excited. I'm very proud of this game. Not only did the creative team from Lori's House all contribute to the actual writing of the game, but also we had incredible other people working on the final version. So please go check that out, and please play the game, because I think it came out as a beautiful way to explore memory through storytelling and magical realism and a bunch of other cool stuff. And I also explain how to write a time loop. So you can go check that out on September 8th and follow us for more announcements and teasers for that. And yeah, outside of that, I am going to go decompress and pet a cat. Thank you really seriously, thank you all so much, not only for sitting through the stream, but also for your support for Kashi and for your understanding pretty much immediately as a community about how frustrated all of the Japanese American people that you know in the community are about this. So thank you for your time and for sharing and reading and learning. That is the most that I can possibly hope for. And with that, I will see you all tomorrow over on Happy Jacks and back here on Wednesday for more 1,000-Year-Old Vampire. Until then, see you soon. Bye.